Draymans Distillery was actually born out of Draymans Brewery, craft brewery, and around 2006 I decided to make whiskey as well. It's born out of my passion for not only drinking whiskey, but the process involved in much the same way as making beer or craft beer is making single malt whiskey. I decided to just sort of bring all the components of a good quality whiskey together and see what comes out of it. Most people initially warned me that whiskey cannot be made in this warm climate and this high altitude, and with our particular problems associated with the Highveld of South Africa. They said coastal regions is ideal, and I decided nonetheless to go ahead and make some whiskey. I used local barley malt from the Swartland area, and I used French oak casks. So first casks was lied in 2006, and then I sent it back to the cooper, and it is regenerated to expose new fresh wood, medium toast level for my own whiskey, and then I put new make spirit, as we call it, into the whiskey. And if you bring proper raw materials into the fermentation vessel with my own brewing yeast, which is another unique characteristic of my whiskey. I don't use distiller's yeast, I use my redundant brewer's yeast. What makes my whiskey in flavor and character so unique? Again, I didn't try and put a specific flavor profile together from the onset. I brought the ingredients together and the whiskey sort of made itself in the end. The whiskey turned out much the same, or sort of in line with my own personality. There's a lot of turmoil going on there. There's some personality issues. I'm a bit of a perfectionist on one side, and I've got eccentricism, a streak of that on the other side. And the whiskey sort of turned out in the same lines. Whiskey also reflects my passion for music. I've been a guitar player since I was a young boy, and again, the components of making whiskey from the raw wood and the raw barley, and going through the process, and after 8 years you have a product which is so unique and so tasty. There's much the same thing for me in music. No whiskey expression that comes out of a specific cask is exactly the same. No certain song in a different person's hands in a guitar turns out to be the same. People often ask me, describe the flavor of your whiskey, and I would immediately point out when they ask, is it something like Scotch? Is it something like an Irish whiskey? Is it more reminiscent of Cavalon, which is also a warmer region whiskey? Now, my whiskey, yes, there is some components that taste like some of the Scottish whiskies from the Highlands, although I'm Highveld. And there's some characteristics of my whiskey, the oiliness and the somewhat barley grain characteristics that is more reminiscent of an Irish whiskey. But all in all, what has been born is a new style of whiskey, and this is African Highveld whiskey. So yes, you have rich oak. Yes, there is a bit of vanilla. Yes, there is a bit of coconut, although I don't use American oak. Also the spiciness of the French oak with its open grain and toasted more like a wine cask rather than charred like a bourbon barrel expresses its flavor differently. So there's a bit of eugenol or allspice, and even a bit of ginger, and then the finish, the cacao and the chocolatey finish on some of my whiskies. The craft of making whiskey and using our hands and our own style and our passion to create something unique, for me, is virtually the same as what a craftsman set out when he has a specific guitar in mind and he builds it from scratch. Handmade guitar, handmade whiskey, I like the ring of it, and it reflects again both the personality of the Lutheran and also the master distiller on the other side. If I make a whiskey and I reflect on it later in the evening and I sip it after it came out of the cask, in 8 years, much the same if you take a guitar and you sit outside silently in a contemplative mood and you play a song for yourself.
My love for guitars and guitar making is something that's always been with me. I don't really know when I first discovered it, but I, as a boy, couldn't get away from a music shop. That's one thing that I remember. And I think, like many African boys, I built my first guitars out of petrol cans. And I've since then been driven by a massive curiosity that still drives me about instruments, about how it works, and there's always been this predominant awareness that the longer I remain busy with this topic, the less I know. I think it's about discovering how wide the field really is and how little of it you really come to master, if you ever do master anything. I absolutely love the traditional work, the work done by the masters, the old classics. And I've always thought that there's just nothing that I can contribute to that. I cannot add anything, I cannot improve on it, which really just emphasized my own curiosity. So I very soon found myself on a path of discovery for new things. And I'm still looking, I'm still experimenting. And recently I've been feeling like I'm returning from a long journey. And all I want to do now is make the old classical things again and test my own theories against what had been proven to be successful. I think this quest of mine has taken me to many interesting people, many interesting places, and I ended up building guitars that could possibly be seen as even weird. I always try to push the design of the guitar to the point where it simply doesn't work anymore, and then work myself backwards. A specific model of mine, the Smooth Talker, has found its way all around the world and has the fascinating characteristic that most people find its appearance attractive or intriguing, at least at first sight. Sound-wise, it's just so different that some people literally immediately fall in love with it, and a lot of them, and I cannot say the percentage, probably half-half, immediately just can't stand them. I don't know, it's possibly like trying out a new taste in food or in beer. I think new is good as long as it's not gimmicky. So in my design work, I've always tried to follow a rule that was possibly not first said, but made famous by an architect. But it says, form follows function, probably one of the most well-known statements ever. So that if you do something very different, at least justify it That's what I've always tried to do, but I have a longing and a yearning now for doing something that I know works, make it elegant, make it simple, and mostly enjoy just making it. So yeah, this is where it's taken me.